A very quick and simple but very useful thing to take note of here is the various switches and exclusions that are available to us. These float around a few places, so if we take a look, for instance, at the light properties, we can see that we have these different switches for what is affected or not affected by the light itself. We have the principal surface features like diffuse and specular, of course OpenGL, which is neither here or there when it actually comes to rendering, effect for volumetrics, whether or not the shadows are ray traced, and indeed which objects are to be included or excluded from the light's purview. And so we can see if we pop on VPR that we are able to take certain items out of the equation here, or at least out of the influence of the light directly itself, or of course allowing the light to affect some properties or not others in this way. We have similar options for objects. If we select an actual object here, you'll see that what we can do is we can include or exclude certain lights from it, rather than including or excluding objects from the light. You'll see that this is absolutely equivalent. If I switch back to the light there and bring up its properties and I go over to the Objects tab, then that has already been excluded here. You can see that the two are, of course, kept in sync with one another, just like that. Again, objects have their own render properties for whether or not they cast or receive shadows, or will cast shadows upon themselves or not, and they can be set to be seen or not seen by the camera itself. Notice of course that when I make it invisible to camera there, that object is still casting a shadow. Unseen by rays is actually unseen by reflection. This isn't so straightforward to make out, but we will see it if we pay attention, just in this scene. That is, obviously with a scene with more obvious reflections it would be more clear, but this sort of yellowy bit of reflection here that we're seeing on the Buddha around here, that's actually the reflection of this figurine. We'll see if we turn on unseen by rays, then that reflection is very much changed. Of course it's still reflecting some stuff in this scene, but it's not reflecting this actual figure. Unseen by radiosity is an important one to get the right way round. Unseen by radiosity simply means that when a ray strikes the object, that ray will not bounce off and illuminate other stuff, similar to the reflection. This is distinct from going into the Lights tab and choosing to exclude radiosity, which prevents the global illumination from actually lighting up this item. You can also set objects to be matte, which just sets them to a fixed colour here. As we see in this case, I've got it set to black. It could be set to some other colour, it doesn't really matter, it just becomes a solid matte object. And you can set the alpha value as well. If we take a look at the alpha channel, then you can see how that allows you to use objects as alpha cutouts in this kind of a way here. Notice as well that matte objecting provides something of a surface override, so you can see now in the reflection of this item that that reflection is of course reflecting the matte object colour here. As such, if you were wanting to use something as some kind of a matte object but you weren't wanting it reflected in other items or casting shadows, then of course you would come over and start twiddling with some of these exclusions and checks here. Of course, all of this is very handy, being able to check and uncheck these properties in different ways, set which surface properties the lights do or do not affect themselves directly. But without some main example, it's hard to see, obviously, what sort of places you would use these in. Really, the options for when you might want to turn any of these things on or off or make them specially set up will vary very much from scene to scene. And it's normally done when you want to force a certain situation into being, essentially cheating your way around the render to create a specific look, rather than have to fiddle with more complex lighting or surface setups. Something that's not quite so easy to explain and demonstrate in such a simple situation. But you will see that once we get into the project section of this training that we do actually turn to some of these settings here and there to help us out and give us little cheats and ways around things to help us just nail certain looks. There we are. These are the various switches and exclusions that we can find in Lightwave for setting the specific render properties of individual objects and lights. And as you'll see, when we do get to projects, they do come in useful. So when setting up your own work, do keep them in mind when you find yourself getting painted into a bit of a corner and you're trying to sort of nudge a certain aspect of a render, but you don't want to have to engage in large-scale changes to your lighting or materials or whatever else. It is in those situations that you will find these little settings coming in very useful, so do keep them in mind.